Let us talk about the megaliths and all these geometric marvels of the ancient world. The question has always remained, who built them? There is an almost universal consensus that the knowledge itself appears to defy ordinary human intelligence. But for me, even the brute force defies human strength. This is my position. Man lacks both the intelligence and the brute force to execute these projects. Genesis 6 and the ancient book of Enoch state that the Watchers possessed advanced cosmic knowledge which they illegally passed down to humanity. While I agree that the knowledge came from the Watchers, I also believe the brute force came from elsewhere. Perhaps the Nephilim, who are described as beings of incredible strength. I have investigated how some of these structures were built, and it is mind-blowing. But forget the materials and the cold execution that went into building them for a moment, and let us look at the science behind them. Most of these megaliths have remarkably strict requirements for true north-south alignment. They were also built on top of ley lines, or what many describe as the Earth's energetic portals. The structures themselves seem to serve as markers for those energy portals, meant to harness the energy rising from within the Earth itself. I also believe later civilizations inherited these ancient structures, restored them, and repurposed them to serve their own rituals and consolidate their authority. In many places, crude later construction sits directly atop far more sophisticated masonry. The line of demarcation is impossible to ignore. But the original purpose envisioned by the original builders was something entirely different. I have seen arguments pointing to some of these structures functioning as substations to power cities. For me, I don't think we have to choose between the power plant theory and the territorial divination theory because they are the exact same thing. The unique architecture leaves little doubt that these structures were designed to transmit energy. However, the ultimate purpose of that energy was not to light up cities. My position that these structures were ancient supercomputers for territorial divination still stands. I have looked at aerial views of some of these structures, and they look like circuit boards from a modern-day computer. Also, the fact that they were built upon the Earth's ley lines and that the peak points aligned with the cosmos tells me that their purpose was astronomical in nature. I believe they may have been used to measure cosmic shifts, such as the shift that occurred during Noah's flood. When you look at their design, it requires an understanding of planetary physics and everything related to that. This statement is important because if you carry the genetic memory of a cataclysm, your highest priority would be a disaster insurance. Genesis 6:4 talks about the Nephilim after the flood. These were the Anakim, Rephaim, and Emim. How that came to be remains debatable. But geological and architectural data strongly suggest that many of these megastructures are split into two completely different eras of construction. I'm thinking pre-flood and post-flood. To me, some of these structures look like they were designed as protection against cataclysms. Many are remarkably resistant to floods and earthquakes, and I don't think that is a coincidence. It seems these post-flood giants were not only surviving on a fractured, high-entropy Earth while carrying the memory of their eradicated ancestors, but also understood that they too were marked for destruction, as later seen in the conquest of Canaan. Therefore, they sought to recreate the technology of the pre-flood world for survival. By anchoring themselves to the Earth's natural energy points, they could effectively map out spiritual and physical high ground, influence local weather patterns, oppress the people spiritually, and sense seismic shifts ahead of time. They were not just building fortresses to hide in. They were building a dark divination network inside massive stones. As you can see, we don't have to choose between the power plant theory and the territorial divination theory, because power generation was the method, while territorial divination was the ultimate objective. Now, I have seen people ask why this style of architecture repeats across centuries in different regions of the world. I ask, why wouldn't it? If the blueprint came from a distinct source and the execution was carried out by the same men of renown, whose strength was efficiency rather than numbers, then the uniformity would make sense. The Bible describes patriarchs living as long as 969 years. Let's round that to 1,000 years. That's the equivalent of 10 centuries by modern standards of a human lifespan. These men of renown belonged to this era, and while scripture does not explicitly state how long they lived, their unique genetic makeup may have given them more than just brute force. Do you know what 10 centuries of life in a low entropy environment, combined with brute physical force and advanced cosmic technology, could birth? Og, king of Bashan, is described as the last of the Rephaim. According to extra-biblical texts, he ruled his kingdom for many centuries. Now imagine a master builder from the line of the men of renown who begins building at the age of 100. He then has another 800 years of uninterrupted compounding experience. Even if a single project took 300 years to complete, he could still build, oversee, and finish 3 such projects during his lifetime. Mind you, I'm not convinced that one project took 300 years. I just used that timeline to make my argument. So, when mainstream archaeologists say these sites can't be related because they were built 300 years apart, I turn to the Bible, consider the lifespans, and I say, nah, it is possible they are related. Let us jump to 2026 because we need to see the parallels. There is always a parallel based on what King Solomon said. What was, is, and will be. The ancients built macro-sized geometric stone grids to siphon the Earth's natural energy currents. Today, the global elite are constructing a micro-sized synthetic global mirror of those same grids using different materials. The planet itself is being turned into a giant hyper-connected microchip. In fact, I would argue that the pre-flood world looked exactly like ours, but was engineered with a vastly superior organic medium because entropy was at its absolute historical minimum. Let nobody lie to you that we are hurtling toward a new age. We are simply recycling ancient sorcery from the Watchers. But the technology itself is not the end goal. The ultimate blueprint is explicitly laid bare in Isaiah 14, where the pride of Lucifer is exposed. When you view the entire global network through this single verse, the sinister, desperate nature of what the enemy is building becomes completely transparent. The devil is a created being. Therefore, he cannot create anything out of nothing as God does. His entire strategy is to build a synthetic mirror of God's creation so that he can sit inside this hyperconnected closed loop and finally play the role of the Almighty.